There is a specific, quiet kind of humiliation that comes with being stood up by your own father. Psychologists often talk about anticipatory grief, the act of mourning a relationship that is technically still alive, but functionally dead. I sat in that crowded, warm restaurant for exactly 2 hours. I watched families laugh, couples share appetizers, and a waiter slowly realized what was happening. When he finally walked over and placed a complimentary dessert on the table, giving me a look of profound, agonizing pity, I didn't cry. I just looked at the melting chocolate. It tasted like ash. Looking back, that was the moment I realized the truth. I hadn't just lost a dinner partner. I had spent 21 years paying an emotional debt to a family that considered me entirely bankrupt. But to understand how I ended up sitting alone in a crowded room, holding a spoon like a shield against my own tears, we have to go back to where the rot first started. I was 4 years old when my father married my stepmother. She brought her 3-year-old daughter, Lily, into our lives. For a long time, we were just sisters. We shared toys, secrets, and a bedroom. But when Lily turned 14, the ground beneath our feet shattered. She was diagnosed with cancer. For 2 years, our home became a temple of quiet panic. It smelled constantly of rubbing alcohol, boiled vegetables, and bleach. Understandably, my parents became fiercely, suffocatingly protective of her. But what I didn't realize at the time was that their protection of Lily required my absolute self-effacement. Psychologists call it parentification, the moment a child is forced to abdicate their youth to become a caregiver. I was forced to quit the varsity volleyball team, the only space where I felt strong, where I felt like myself. I remember throwing a brief, desperate tantrum in the kitchen, only for my father to slam his hand on the counter. I watched the color drain from his face as his knuckles turned white. He looked at me with pure disgust and said, "Your sister is fighting for her life, and you are crying about a game?" I never threw a tantrum again. I got a part-time job, and every dollar I made went directly toward her medical copays. I drove her to her chemotherapy appointments. I skipped school dances. And if I wanted to do anything fun, Lily had to come along. I did it willingly because I loved her, and because I naively believed that my sacrifice was a down payment on a lifetime of unconditional family love. I was wrong. Lily eventually made a full recovery, and I left for college as soon as I could. That was where I met Ben. Ben was grounded, gentle, and slow to anger. He felt like the antidote to the constant, low-grade anxiety I had carried since childhood. After graduation, we moved into a quiet apartment together. For 3 years, we built a life. We talked about marriage, about buying a house with a yard. He once took childhood photos of both of us and photoshopped them together to show me what our future kids might look like. It was a silly, slightly terrifying photo, but I kept it as my phone background for months. I trusted him completely, which is why the silence that followed was so loud. It was a mundane, scorching Tuesday afternoon in July. I came home early from work, holding a bag of groceries, intending to surprise him. But when I stepped into the entryway, I saw 2 pairs of shoes. One was Ben's worn-out leather boots. The other was a pair of delicate, strappy leather sandals. Lily's sandals. I walked up the stairs, my chest tightening, with a sudden, irrational dread. The bedroom door was slightly ajar. I didn't scream. I didn't drop the groceries. I just stood there, paralyzed, watching the 2 people I had sacrificed my youth and my heart for, completely destroying what was left of my life. There is a peculiar numbness that shields you when your entire world collapses in a single second. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I simply watched Ben scramble to pull the sheets over his panic, and I watched my sister stare at the ceiling, refusing to meet my eyes. Within 48 hours, Ben's half of our apartment was gone. Empty hangers clattered in the closet. The apartment smelled of cardboard and coal dust. Lily sent a brief, half-hearted text apologizing, and then went completely silent. I thought she was giving me space. I was wrong. She was just waiting for the dust to settle so she could sweep me under the rug. 2 months later, she asked to meet at a local diner. I went, foolishly hoping for a genuine confession. Instead, Lily slid into the booth, her skin glowing, looking healthier than she had in years. She didn't offer an apology. She offered a warning. Ben and I are in love, she said, her voice smooth and devoid of any real weight. We wanted to tell you as a courtesy, before we start posting photos online. We don't want it to be awkward for the family. A courtesy. That was the word she used. She wanted my permission to parade the man who had shared my bed for 3 years in front of our entire extended family. I didn't argue. I simply stood up, walked out of the diner, and left her with the bill. When she sent me a Venmo request for my half of the coffee 15 minutes later, I realized she didn't view her betrayal as a sin. To her, it was just a minor administrative error. The real devastation, however, didn't wear Lily's face. It wore the familiar, weathered faces of my parents. They summoned me to their house the following weekend. Stepmom did the talking, while my father sat beside her, staring at his hands in silent approval.
"You're being incredibly selfish, Papaya," my stepmother said, her voice dripping with artificial warmth. "You have to understand. Lily had cancer as a teenager. She missed out on crucial social development. She doesn't know proper etiquette. It's hard for her to meet people." I sat there, paralyzed by the sheer audacity of the lie. I had missed the exact same social development because I was working to pay her medical bills. Yet somehow, I had managed not to sleep with her partners. "If you can't accept their relationship," my father finally spoke, his voice cold and final, "we may have to step back from our relationship with you. We won't have you bringing jealousy and negativity into this family." They were threatening to exile me for refusing to applaud my own betrayal. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place that evening. My cousin called me. His voice hushed. "She's pregnant," he whispered. "Lily, she's 4 months along." 4 months. The math was simple, brutal, and undeniable. They had been sleeping together while Ben was still kissing me goodbye in the mornings. And my parents weren't defending Lily out of pity. They were protecting their own narrative. My pain was a direct threat to my stepmother's upcoming Facebook updates about her perfect first grandchild. I was no longer a daughter. I was an inconvenient reminder of a dirty secret. But as I sat in the quiet of my empty apartment, a strange, cold peace washed over me. They wanted me to play the bitter, jealous sister. They wanted a reaction to validate their victimhood. But I wasn't going to give them a scene. I was going to give them exactly what they asked for. Absolute silence. A few weeks later, Lily asked me to meet her at a park. No diners, no bills to argue over. Sitting on that cold wooden bench, she finally admitted the truth. She was pregnant. Then, with tears streaming down her face, she asked me to stay in her life. She wanted me to be the baby's godmother. It was a classic psychological maneuver. If I accepted, I would be validating her betrayal. I would become the safe, reliable sister again, the unpaid babysitter, the emergency bank account, the emotional shield she could point to whenever someone questioned how her relationship with Ben began. My presence would wash away her guilt. I looked at her tears and realized they weren't tears of remorse for what she had done to me. They were tears of anticipation for the consequences she was about to face. "No," I said, my voice quiet but absolute. "I can no longer be in your life." I stood up and walked away. Leaving her crying on that bench was the hardest thing I have ever done. It made me feel like the villain in her story. But sometimes you have to be the villain in someone else's narrative just to remain the hero in your own.
Next, I took away my parents' ability to control the story. I didn't go nuclear on social media. Instead, I sent a calm, factual email to the extended family members I actually cared about. I laid out the timeline, the pregnancy, the affair, and my parents' ultimatum. No anger, no hyperbole, just the cold, devastating truth. The fallout was immediate. My stepmother sent a long, panicked email, apologizing and admitting her emotions had gotten the better of her. But my dad? He said absolutely nothing. His silence was a masterclass in emotional abandonment. I blocked them all. But the most satisfying silence of all belonged to Ben. A month before the baby was due, Ben showed up at my apartment. He didn't look like the confident man I had spent 3 years building a life with. He looked hollow, aged, and terrified. He knocked, and when I didn't answer, he sat on my welcome mat and cried. For 3 hours, he spoke to the wooden door. He told me he made a mistake, that he didn't love Lily, that the reality of the crying baby and the ruined family was suffocating him. He begged me to take him back. I stood on the other side of that door, looking through the peephole, and felt absolutely nothing. He had made his bed, and now he had to lie in it with my sister. I didn't open the door. I didn't yell. I simply went to my kitchen, poured a cup of tea, and listened to the muffled sound of my ex-fiancé weeping for the life he had stupidly thrown away. His misery was entirely self-inflicted, clean and legally unassailable. The final step of my exit was physical. I packed my life into a truck and moved halfway across the country, vanishing into a new city where no one knew my name, my sister, or my pain. Spontaneous moves are terrifying, but sometimes you have to burn your old life to the ground just to see what can grow from the ashes. It took time, a lot of tears, and a brilliant therapist who finally helped me untangle the knot of my childhood. I was diagnosed with depression, a hard pill to swallow for someone who had spent her entire life pretending to be the happy fixer. But I learned that always taking care of everyone else was just a shield. I was terrified that if I showed even a sliver of my own pain, I wouldn't be loved. But then I met him. He didn't demand my sacrifice. He didn't ask me to shrink myself. When I have bad days, he doesn't roll his eyes or tell me to get over it. He either silently sits on the couch with me or he whispers ridiculous, dirty jokes. He whispers ridiculous, dirty jokes in a spot-on Kermit the Frog voice until I'm laughing too hard to remember why I was sad. He's far too busy painting D&D minis to ever find the time to cheat on me. A few weeks ago, under a sky full of stars, he asked me to marry him. I said yes. The internet is a menace. So of course my estranged family found out. My dad is apparently having a total hissy fit because my fiancé didn't ask for his patriarchal permission to marry me. He feels disrespected. The irony is almost poetic. A father who stood me up, who chose his stepdaughter's vanity over my broken heart, is angry because a man he doesn't know didn't ask for a blessing he never earned. Sucks to suck, I suppose. I used to think revenge had to be explosive, a grand, dramatic ruin of the people who hurt you. But I was wrong. The ultimate revenge is far quieter and completely legal. It is the unyielding wall of your indifference. It is building a life of genuine contentment, a life so beautiful and warm that the people who betrayed you no longer even exist as a shadow in your mind. My current life is built on real contentment, not fear disguised as shallow happiness. I am proud of myself, and I think my mom would be proud of me too. I survived their storm. And today, the sun is finally shining. No more emotional debts, just the warm, golden light of a brand new day. I used to think my quiet exit was the ultimate act of indifference. But a few years ago, I heard a story that redefined what quiet ruin truly means. It was about a man who didn't scream and who didn't throw plates. Instead, using nothing but a yellow sticky note, an odometer log, and cold mathematical precision, he synchronized a double exposure at exactly 2 p.m. on a Thursday. Within 48 hours, his rival lost his career, his home, and his family, without the husband ever raising his voice. If you want to know how a simple yellow note became a weapon of absolute clinical ruin, watch the next video.